What was on the news? They were, no, it was blocked before that, and then when they were responding to that accident, they turned in a turnabout and they got hit by a car.
602, and I thought somewhere it said about 608.
Yeah.
Barb, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
How do I make myself silent on phone? I've never done that.
#6.
#6. And then I don't want to talk, but if I have to, what would I do to get back?
I believe it's #6 again.
Okay, I'll do #6. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. Thanks for letting us know you're here. Okay, welcome everybody. I'm going to go ahead and call this January 6th meeting of the Rules and Resolutions Committee to order. Was there proper proof of notification?
Posted on the bulletin board downstairs on the county website. It was sent to,
I sent it out, but
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure it was posted downstairs in the hallway too. So thank you, Ms. Dole. Agenda item number 3, agenda approval. We've got a 10-point agenda for the committee today. Motion by Cosgrove, second by Luck. All those in favor of the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, that motion carries. We have an agenda, and I should say too, we do have a quorum. We have all 5 people here today. Me and Mr. Cosgrove are in the room here at the courthouse today, and everyone else is online. Agenda item number 4, previous meeting minutes. Looking for a motion to approve those.
So moved.
Motion by Luck. Second by Cosgrove. Any discussion on those? All those in favor, please say aye. Anyone opposed? I'll take silence as minutes are great. Those are approved. Agenda item number 5, commission board role in monitoring annual budgets. Okay, so I've got a series of items for you all today. This is a continuation of a discussion, this particular one of discussion that we had at the December meeting. So here today, I'm recommending a motion to draft a change to the committee structure document, bringing consistency to the practice of monitoring the annual budget of departments for consideration at a future Rules and Resolutions Committee meeting. So last time the committee authorized research on how different committees, commissions, and boards do this financial oversight. We don't have any language in the committee structure document about how these committees, commissions, and boards should monitor the annual budgets of departments. So I did some research, and then Mr. Severson helped me verify, and in some cases, I made corrections based on what he told me from the committees, commissions, and boards he's on. What I did is I researched minutes of all these different bodies. I did not contact committee chairs or department heads. And what I found is in 5A and page 1, these are the 17 regularly meeting committee, commissions, or boards that have departments reporting to them. So in the in the second column, 12 out of 17 of these committees, commissions, and boards, it looks like they do regularly approve monthly bills. By the way, if you all see mistakes in this, as we're going through it, don't be shy about speaking up, because Carrie corrected me on a couple of these, and so you all might have some corrections too. There's some notes in the third column. Then as far as this issue of monitoring annual budgets of reporting departments, 6 out of the 17 committees are doing this monitoring, as far as I can tell. And I think there's quite a bit of variability in how different departments do this with their committees, commissions, and boards. But the 6 were Health and Human Services, Law Enforcement and Judiciary, Pine Valley, Simons, UW Platteville Richland, And I know Veteran Service has just started doing this. So that's the current state of the situation. And then I've got some language here drafted for the committee to think about. I'm thinking under each of those 17 committees, commissions, and boards, we need some language that gets specific about this so everyone knows and is encouraged to do this. The language could be monitor the actual versus approved annual budget and funds managed by the blank departments on a minimum quarterly basis. So if that's something that you all are interested in doing, if you go back to 5A and go to page 2, this time I listed out which departments report to which committees, commissions, or boards. So there's only 3 committees that have more than one department reporting to them. So finance and personnel has the most departments reporting to them. And there are 7 of them: the administrator, the clerk, corporation counsel, MIS, property lister, register of deeds, and the treasurer. And then the law enforcement and judiciary committee, that would be the second most number of departments reporting to that committee. And that's the clerk of court, the coroner, the DA, register and probate, and the sheriff. And then the UW Platteville Richland Committee is the only other one that's got more than one department reporting to it. And that would be food services and then UW Platteville Richland maintenance. So what are your all's thoughts on this?
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, go ahead.
sorry for the phone ringing in the background.
It's okay, we can't hear it.
Okay, good.
Just you.
So LEJC, we do this, and it's actually not as time consuming as you would think, because the reports that we get from the departments that they in turn get from our accounting people, it has a column that shows you the percentage spent from each individual budget line item. And so, if you're halfway through the year, if you're looking at it in June and they're more than 50% spent, they're overspent, or if it's less than that, they've underspent. So I find we do it regularly, and I find it to be very, very helpful. It helps me ask the right questions, especially as we move through the budget process, as to where we should be budgeting more, where we could be budgeting less. So I just wanted to say that I think that they're incredibly helpful. I don't know how much of I guess I'd like to ask our administrator how much of a burden this is on the accounting people. I assume it's a form that we can run through our accounting program that, you just tell it which you want, but I guess I'd like to hear a little bit more from him on how, if we do it for every single department, how much of a burden is that on our accounting people?
You want to take that, Mr. Chair? This is Administrator Langberg. So when we finish out a month and we close out the month, or we reconcile the month the best we can, then the reports are generated through our accounting supervisor position. And it can take several hours to the better part of a day to generate those reports, and then we drop them into our server that we have, our inner organizational server, a folder that we can drop those into, and then several of the departments get them emailed out because they don't have access into our county's server. So it's probably a good 4 to 6 hour investment in administrative time to run those types of reports. Now, in taking the next step, then we're looking at putting together for finance and personnel to try to do a budget performance monitoring in broad strokes across the multiple funds and multiple accounts that we're trying to formulate. That would add into some administrative times that we don't know yet because we haven't instituted it or implemented it to try it out. But then there might be additional times that the departments then would be going back, reviewing their individual accounts and funds, and then taking those and putting them back into a master tracking sheet to try to boil down some of the bigger numbers then for presentation back to finance and personnel. Does that answer your question, Supervisor Luck?
So what you're saying is that the reports that I've already been getting at LEJC, you're thinking there would be something more in depth that would be given to finance, but the rest of the departments, could we just continue to get, or rest of the committees, could we continue to get the reports we've already been getting, and that wouldn't be as much work?
the reports delivered at a department level are status quo on right now on what it takes to produce. The report that we're trying to put together for finance and personnel is kind of the opposite of more in-depth and to try to make it more broad and digestible for across the entire organization. And that we don't have a firm hold on yet because we've yet to implement that and get it put together for a report.
Yeah, I mean, I get the full reports from my departments, from LEJC, and yeah, it's a lot of pages, but once you kind of figure them out, it's not hard to go to the lines that are the most important. So, I guess I would say that I think we can get the information we need from what you're already doing. And if it's not a lot of work to do the new reports, that's great. But if it is something that becomes a really burden, then I would say that there's no reason why finance couldn't do the same thing LEJC does and look through the reports as they are already existing.
So, Mr. Langrick, I thought I heard from Clerk Kalish that the reports are already all generated, and it's up to them being department heads if they want to go and get the reports or not. So there would be no additional work for these department heads
To report to their supervisory committees. The additional work that we've yet to kind of cross the threshold is in trying to do the summary report that we've discussed for finance and personnel to come back then and having department heads sift through their numbers and then fill in for the summary one is yet a bridge we haven't quite crossed yet.
Yeah, and just to clarify, we don't have any issue with the committee structure document with that because the finance and personnel committee's already been given the authority by the county board to monitor the budget over the course of the year for different departments and fund numbers. So today, what we're really just discussing is just individual department reports to these committees, commissions, and boards. It might be a little confusing because we do have 7 departments that also report to the Finance and Personnel Committee. And there we might be getting the more detailed reports potentially. But it's the summary report. It's related, but kind of a separate topic from what we're trying to do today is just figure out, should we have this language in the committee structure document for each of the committees, commissions, and boards?
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
I'll just want to make sure you understand. I think that these reports are incredibly helpful and I have found them to be very useful. And I don't think they're, I think it's worthwhile. It's a worthwhile effort to do this, and we should definitely pursue this at all committee levels.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Mr. Seat, go ahead.
Yes, I certainly agree with Ms. Luck. I wondered if I could ask a question directed toward Ms. Luck with regard to the LEJC reports that she receives.
You got go ahead.
Those reports are divided into different segments. One can be a monthly report, right, of current accounting. Another can be just a monthly expenditure report, and then you have a year-to-date report. How many different segments are you looking at besides the overall report? You're looking at payroll?
Right. So as far as what's happening in an individual month, they give us, the sheriff's department is the only one that gives us a list of current expenditures. The report that we get that comes from the accounting people has different columns in it, and one column would be this month's expenses, the next column would be year to date, and then another column shows you what percentage of that of what's budgeted has been spent. So that's all in one report.
Yes, I remember that. Mm-hmm. Very good. That is extremely helpful. No question about it.
Okay, thoughts from anyone else on this? So the motion that we're looking for is to draft a change to the committee structure document to add that language that I read off.
I would make that motion.
Okay, we got a motion by Cosgrove and we'll do a second by Luck.
A second.
Any further discussion? And this will be coming, this would be coming back to the Rules Committee after the change has been drafted. Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, I'm in favor as well, so that carries unanimously.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Seat.
just as a sidebar, I had asked the clerk if he would be willing on occasion to come to a committee and go over a report in kind of a tutorial way to sort of walk committee members through the report. There, just as a board educational entity. Sometimes, especially new board members, have difficulty reading and understanding a report, especially since it's a foreign language to some people.
Yeah, I think there's plenty for all of us to learn, and it sounds like Supervisor Luck can help us as well, since she's been, her and other folks who are on LEJC, I think we've got a couple other people on this committee. They're probably pretty good at it too. I know I need to learn a lot. Okay, well, thanks for that, and thanks, actually, Mr. Seep. You kind of got this going when you requested it from the Veterans Commission, and that's really got it on this agenda here. So thank you for being on top of that and asking those questions. Agenda item number 6, roles and responsibilities of the county board chair and vice chair. So I don't believe we've had this as a separate agenda item before, but it's come up in discussions about a process for running for board chair and vice chair. So I did some research a few days ago to look at what responsibilities have we as a county board over the years given the county board chair and the vice chair. So I just went through all the documents I could think of. I knew that Mr. Langreck, when he drafted that policy that we adopted pretty early on after we hired him, to kind of separate out what's the authority of management versus the roles of members and chairs of committees, boards, and commissions. The county board chair was listed in that policy that we adopted, and there were 3 different points that came from the board rules. But when I went to the board rules, and I actually read through the whole thing to see where I could find that the chair and the vice chair had some responsibilities. So in this section that's like it says number 1, number 2, number 2, number 2, number 2, number 3, number 4, I just listed out everything I could see that person is responsible for, from the most minute thing to sitting at the head table at county board meetings to bigger responsibilities like assigning proposed resolutions and ordinances to the appropriate committee when there is doubt. So I could certainly read through those, but I'll just skim over them for now, unless I hear that someone wants them read out. Then I also went to the committee structure document that we're responsible for here at Rules to make recommended changes for. And looks like there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, something like that. 12 different types of responsibilities that, and this is for the board chair, this is not the vice chair, has as far as the committee structure document. There's a few different groups, like one group is the board chair is an automatic member or a member of several different committees. So the ADA Compliance Committee, they're an automatic member of. Committee on Committees, Economic Development, Emergency Management Committee, Finance and Personnel, Simons. Although Simons is the only one that has an exception where the chair may designate and appoint a designee to serve on Simons if they don't want to. Then there is a group of things where the county board chair is responsible for making the appointment of supervisor members subject to county board confirmation. There's no committee on committee involvement. And those are the library board appointments for Richland Center, Lone Rock, and Viola, as well as the Richland Center Park Board. And then there were a couple other unique things. The Emergency Management Committee, the chair is responsible for designating the chair of the committee, and that's per Wisconsin statute. And then the other one is the Veteran Service Commission. The board chair is responsible for making appointments to that, also per Wisconsin statute. No committee on committee involvement. Then state statutes. I'm sure I didn't get all of them, but I just did some Google search function on the state legislative website to see what I could find. I don't know if I need to read all these, but like the veterans one, there's a little more detail on that one that's here. Also something about making sure each of those people have a surety bond on the Veterans Commission. 59.12, that's really the heart of the county board chair's responsibilities in state statutes. It says that the county board chair shall countersign all ordinances of the board. They shall preside at meetings when present. Then there are several optional things. An optional thing in state statute is that they may administer oaths to persons required to be sworn concerning any matter submitted to the board or a committee of the board or connected with their powers or duties. And then another optional section, it says, when directed by ordinance, the chairperson shall countersign all county orders. Not quite sure what an order is, but transact all necessary board business with local and county officers, expedite all measures resolved upon by the board, and take care that all federal, state, and local laws, rules, and regulations pertaining to county government are enforced. So those are all optional things that we don't have anywhere that I'm aware of unless there's an ordinance that was passed by the county board at some point. They also have the authority to appoint county representatives to TIFs, TIDs, tax incremental districts. And then one that I realized I forgot was, I think it's 59.13, so right after the main one, it says that the county board chair may be given that authority to appoint members of committees of the county board, which is what we've already took some action on in December. So that's also in statute. And then for the vice chair, there's not as much. In our county board rules, they're just an automatic member of a couple of committees. They take over if the chair is attending remotely. That's one of our rules. We're obviously absent. They're also an automatic member of the Emergency Management Committee on top of Committee on Committees and Finance and Personnel. That's pretty much it.
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, just as a point of information, I believe that the oath of office requires all county board members, and which would include the chair, to take care that all state statutes in accordance with the Constitution, laws and ordinances of the county as well, be enforced. I think that's in our oath of office.
Yeah, okay, that's good to know. I didn't remember that. I remember something about the Constitution, but it'd be good to dig that out, I think, too. Look at that language. That's a good idea. So what I did then, because it seemed like I was doing other research from other counties. I can't remember. There were a couple things going on here. I went and I looked at all those different counties that we looked at, I believe, last month that are peer counties, like population-wise, and having an administrator. And I looked through their county board rules, or sometimes the county board rules are in the ordinances. So I went to the ordinances and I pulled out to see if other counties had a special section where they said, these are the roles and responsibilities of the chair and or the vice chair. So I did find sections in county board rules or ordinances in Bayfield County, Ozaukee, Price, Sawyer, St. Croix, and Waushara. And then I highlighted in yellow, this would be 6A, I believe. It's about 20 pages or 18 pages. And I highlighted in yellow what each of these counties have, what authority they've given the county board chair or vice chair. It's kind of like a job description, but just buried within these other documents. So in some counties, you can tell they went to state statute, that 59.12 section I was reading from earlier, and they gave their county board chair the authority to do those different things. Some counties, they have some other special things. I think I saw one somewhere where they recruit members to appoint to the county board when there are vacancies. That was one that kind of jumped out to me. I'm reading one right now. The chairperson shall receive all requests and communications not specifically addressed to any committee or official of the county and refer such matters to the appropriate committee or official. So kind of like our resolution ordinance one, but it's a little more general in that county. There's a lot of information in here. I don't know if you all have had, a chance to read through it all, but there it is. So looking for reactions and thoughts on this one from folks. I was recommending that we draft an amendment to our existing policy to include required and optional roles for the board chair and vice chair. And I don't mean that the chair would have the option to do certain things. I'm just saying for this committee, there are required things that the board chair has to do according to statute, and there are optional things. And so just coming up with a list for this committee to kind of think through.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, go ahead.
if my memory serves me correctly, at one time, I think we passed a resolution or a motion designating as an option for the vice chair to conduct educational programs for boards and committees. Am I correct or does my memory serve me correctly there?
I don't, Mr. Cosgrove doesn't remember that. I don't, but I know that we've had our vice chair doing that recently, but
Yes.
I don't know if there was ever any. I doubt there was an ordinance, but I don't know if there was a.
I think there was a motion.
There was a motion, you mean in this committee or you mean at the county board?
I don't recall where it came
Okay.
from. I
I'm
think
kind of looking to Mr. Langrek to see if he's kind of shaking his head.
Mr. Turk should remember that.
We could certainly ask the clerk also if there's anything that's been passed about the chair or the vice chair responsibilities. More an ordinance or resolution.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, go. Mr. Seep, did you want to finish your thought before?
It might have been more informal. I don't, but I do recall that we had asked Mr. Turk to do educational things for the board.
Okay. Ms. Luck, go ahead.
I just had a question for you. And going through all of this and having read, was there anything in particular that jumped out at you that you thought we should add to what we already have in our language?
Well, I didn't make a list. No, I'm really today just bringing everything for you all to see. And if we want to make a list, we could do that. I think we could make a list of all the possibilities and we could come with a recommended list to the committee, or the committee could just go through things one by one and we could see if people object to certain ones. Mandatory ones, that are in state statute, we don't have any choice about that anyway, but it's the optional ones that I think this committee could really give a lot of opinion on.
So maybe for next time, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking for next time. Exactly. The only other one did maybe kind of jump out to me that I don't know if I saw anywhere in any of these, but the counties association says that the county board chair often serves as the spokesperson for the county board. Sometimes different counties will interpret that kind of as they're the representative at meetings, like with cities, villages, and townships in their county, or with different governmental bodies that might be bigger than the county. So we don't have that laid out anywhere clearly, and it does seem to me that it would be kind of a good idea to talk about that at this committee. You know, do we?
Yes.
That already kind of happens to some extent, I think, but do we need to make it a little more formal?
Mr. Chairman, may I?
Go ahead.
I think that's a very important point, and I think that since we have an administrator, that the administrator and or the county board chair should be the primary spokesman for the county. I think that's important because on occasion, sometimes someone else may be called upon to respond to a question from the press or otherwise. And I believe that those things should be referred to and filtered through the county administrator so that the county speaks with one voice. We don't want to get in a situation where a department head or some other employee of the county makes a statement that is in contradiction to what may be the viewpoint of the administrator or the county chair. And so I think it's very important that our communications to the public be integrated through the administrator and or the chair or both. I think that's very important.
Okay, well, we can certainly have some language ready at the next meeting that we can then tweak or make sure that we're all comfortable with.
I would be interested in Mr. Langrick's response to that observation.
Yes, if you're dealing with a public information officer type of a role, I think it's kind of implied when we're talking about general type of operations. I guess at the same time, if we hit certain incidences or circumstances, if it's involvement with law enforcement versus an emergency versus some other type of a function, then obviously we'd still be kind of deferring to our subject matter expert, department heads or public health officer as such. But overall, in context of general county operations or questions imposed by states and other government type of entities, then I would agree with having certainly centralized channels for how we're communicating out.
Yeah, I can understand where Mr. Langrick or whomever is the spokesman would have at his side perhaps the emergency government manager or someone else, perhaps the director of human services, to fill in details. But I do think that those all need to be integrated side by side with the administrator or the county chair. And I wonder how the county chair feels about that.
And usually how I've seen it referred to is this is just the spokesperson for the county board. That's only what we're talking about here. We're not necessarily talking about the spokesperson for the entire county operation. You know, the administrator is oftentimes going to be the spokesperson for how the county is run and a lot of the details. And then he might defer to certain department heads or to the county board chair if it really gets into more of a policy decision about whether something has been done or what the board believes about a certain topic or issue. Or if we might not even know what the county board thinks. We might not have taken positions on certain things. So I think it's really more in the context often of what the county board thinks. And so that's why I think it's maybe that's why I highlighted that one, because it might be important for us to talk about that as a county board. That's one of the roles of the county board chair, is to speak for the county board. you know, that's going to influence,
The, the
It's-
county board is responsible for the entire county operations, however.
that's true. That is very true. At a high level, at a high policy level.
Correct.
So,
The ultimate, the county board is the ultimate authority.
okay, so what I got today, recommended here is a motion to recommend drafting an amended policy on authority of management, roles of members and chairs of committees, boards, and commissions to include required and optional roles and responsibilities of the county board chair and vice chair for consideration at a future rules and resolutions committee meeting. Kind of wordy, but it's all written
I would
down
make
for you
that motion,
already.
Sean. This is Kerry.
Okay, motion by Severson, second by Cosgrove. Any further discussion on that motion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 And I'm in favor too, so that carries unanimously. Okay, so thanks for input on that. I think that'll help us get moving along on that topic, and we'll see if we can get that done here in the next few months. Agenda item number 7, the process for running for board chair and vice chair. So we also discussed this in December, and I want to start off first with an apology. I was trying to figure out what our next step should be, and so I watched the video from the December meeting, and I seem to have really gotten hung up on the timing aspect of all this and wanting certain dates. And as I was rewatching it, I was arguing with myself because I said, why do we need to know the dates right now? So anyway, I just want to apologize. That was sort of toward the end of the meeting. I must have been getting a little tired and still coming off of my COVID illness. So I was able to think a little more clearly when I was writing this out this past weekend. So what I've got here today is a recommended motion to recommend a process for running for board chair and vice chair to be drafted into county board rules for consideration at a future rules and resolutions committee meeting. So the discussion we had last time was really helpful, actually, because you all made certain points that I put into this 7-step process. And steps 2, 5, and 7 were things I heard people say at the last committee meeting. We didn't poll people to see if everyone agreed with these, but I wrote them down. So I'll just read those off first, and then I'll go through the optional ones. So step number 2, and it would become step number 1 if we don't do optional step number 1. But step number 2 is candidates for chair and vice chair should indicate their interest in the positions on, I didn't write that right, on the committee, board, commission, and seat preference form. So Mr. Langrek had given us an orientation packet that he's been working on for the next county board term. And it says on there, if you're interested in being chair, check this box. Interested in vice chair, check this box. So that would be the first step that we discussed already. Skipping down to step number 5, the next step we discussed was candidates for county board chair and vice chair may directly contact county board members elect, or who aren't sworn in yet, but who likely will be, to campaign for the positions. And Mr. Severson, you had mentioned several people having reached out to you in the past personally, and I think that's pretty well accepted that that's kind of how this stuff works in different counties across the state. And then step 7, the last one we discussed last time, at the organizational meeting, nominations shall be made and seconded. That's not in our county board rules right now. And then the election of the chair and vice chair shall follow the verbiage already in the county board rules. And the county board rule says at the organization meeting in even numbered years, the board shall elect a chair and vice chair by secret ballot. All ballots shall be formal ballots. a majority of votes of the members present shall be necessary to elect.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah,
I believe that the nominations were also made in the past by secret ballot.
I don't recall. Does anyone else recall if that was the case?
I guess I can't remember it all, so I'm just curious.
This is Administrator Langrick. I was only on board with you folks for once. I think we did our organizational meeting was at the county highway shop, if memory serves. And I remember we did a ballot for actually casting. I don't recall that we did a secret ballot to nominate someone. I think the nominations would still have to come off the floor, even if we, like, I would visualize it, even if we had folks on their interest, their letter or their committee assignments of interest list, to present a list of these are the names that of folks that are interested in it, and we'd still need a nomination in a second off the floor to formalize that nomination is how I would visualize it.
Okay, Ms. Luck, you were.
I was just gonna say that Marty just said, is anyone interested in Vice Chair Melissa? I think you were, and then he had me introduce myself and talk for a minute. So I definitely don't feel like the nominations were by secret ballot.
It doesn't sound like we had a second being required either then.
I guess that was with the highway committee and a couple of others.
That could be. Okay, so if we go with this, I guess let's just take these three first. And let's make sure, let's see if anyone has objections to those three that we just discussed. So number 2 was indicating your preference on the form for these 1 or 2 of these seats. The ability to directly contact people, that's already happening. And then the last one is nominations shall be made and seconded. And then follow the language already in county board rules. Does anyone have any reservations with those 3?
Mr. Chairman, we should not exclude anybody from having second thoughts and making a nomination from the floor as well. For a candidate other than those who have indicated a preference.
Well, Mr. Cosgrove just said he thinks that's already included in number 7.
Okay. If it is, it is.
Yeah, the language written down that I wrote down from our meeting last time is at the organizational meeting, nominations shall be made and seconded.
To clarify then, Mr. Chair, on step 2, where we're saying candidates should indicate their interest of positions at the seating preference form. Soften that it's encouraged then or something of that, just to not have a process step missed. Somebody later on at that organizational meeting decided they would like to seek nomination. I guess that'd just be my recommendation to affirm then that like a step 2 is not required to still be able to be nominated the night of.
So you would you're saying strike the word should and replace it with are encouraged to?
I think that would take some of the confusion out of it, just so that you understood what the expectations were, that you were encouraged to, but you can still be nominated the night of.
Makes sense. Okay. Does anyone have any objection to that word change?
I think that's helpful.
Okay, so.
Mr. Chair.
Yep, go ahead.
Sorry, I mean, the only problem that I have with that is that, I mean, I really think it's important, especially if we decide, or the county board decides that the chair will be the person appointing people to committees and such. And if, I would just hate to have, I think if someone wants to be chair or vice chair, I really hope that they would fill out the questionnaire and make their intentions known so that we can make informed decisions and aren't, making a decision on the floor. I mean, because I think that's the process we're trying to avoid, right? Is making sure that when it comes time to vote, we actually have some information about who in our opinion might be the best person to lead the board in the next 2 years. So I guess I'm hesitant to say, I mean, I think we want to discourage people from just getting nominated off the floor without having declared their intention and filled out some kind of information about what their agenda would be as chair.
Okay, other thoughts on that? Up to the mic.
I can see it both ways as well, but I think honestly, the individuals interested in running for chair are gonna do diligence and fill those forms out.
Are you, Mr. Langreich, were you thinking, I know Mr. Seep was agreeing with you too about the word change. Are you thinking there might be a situation where
I would think
this
it's,
almost dark horse candidate might come up and,
I would say that's probably not very likely. I'm just trying to think and what we establish here today and now might affect generations of supervisors down the road, and it might lead up to something like that. I don't think that anything is so political with the folks we have in place. And most often I've seen it in counties where folks running for chair and vice are quite well established in the organization and have had tenure with the organization, where it's not just somebody coming in off of a brand, first session and, hey, I think I'd like to do that, and all of a sudden being appointed to a vice and chair is hard to visualize. Likewise, too, somebody just deciding at the last second that, well, why not? But again, just trying to put us in a position where it's what's the expectation? Do you have to submit an interest at the front end and make everybody know prior to that organization, or can a nomination happen that night of and then still being able to be recognized and have it as part of the process? So it's just, for me, it's really firming up what the expectation is, to know that there is that opportunity where you can be called off the floor on the night of, even though you weren't interested in whatever reasons led to that event, or if it has to be kind of made up front, known that you're interested in it.
Mr. Chairman,
Yep, go ahead.
I understand Melissa's point about wanting to know who the potential or the candidate might want to appoint to various committees. I can see where an alternative to actually naming people would be the possibility of stating what your values are and what values you're looking for in leadership in those committees. I think if we start naming names ahead of time, it might tend to be, in some cases, divisive or possibly offensive to some people who might want to be considered and who are not mentioned, and may affect their vote. Whereas if you are just asking the candidate to outline what values he's looking for, what standards he's looking for in leadership, I think that might be more diplomatic and perhaps more professional than naming names. If you ask a candidate to come forth with who's going to serve on this committee and who's going to serve on that and who's going to chair it here and who's going to chair it there, that's putting a lot of work on that candidate ahead of time, because I would think that a candidate would want to have a consultation with various board members and committee members. And that takes a lot of time and a lot of thought when you're talking about how many committees are there, 21 or 31? Whereas if you generalize and make very clear what your standards are and what you're looking for in leadership, you're not naming names and you're not potentially hurting feelings or dividing people.
Mr. Seep, we aren't really discussing at the moment when exactly the appointments would be made. And by the way, of course, this committee has recommended that the county board chair makes the appointments, but that hasn't been approved by the county board yet. So we.
But
we-
if that
Hold on,
were
hold
the
on, hold on,
case-
wait, hold on. So we don't actually know if we're doing that or not, but the issue that we're discussing right now is, should candidates for chair and vice chair be required to check a box on the board commission form and seat preference form, saying whether they want to be the county board chair or the county board vice chair?
Well,
all
that's
we're
fine.
discussing right now. Okay,
Well,
so I just want to,
That's fine.
and we're just discussing, should they be required to or only be encouraged to?
I'm sorry, I was responding to Melissa's remark about wanting a candidate to name names.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I agree. I actually am not really comfortable with the whole idea of someone campaigning for chair based on who they're going to put on committees. That's not at all what I'm concerned about. I agree with you. I want them to indicate what their values are, what their goals are for the session. So that's not, my emphasis is not at all on who's, wanting to know who's assigning me to what committees. I would prefer not to know, honestly.
well, great minds think together.
Mr. Chair, can we just say strongly encouraged to make it a really strong recommendation? It isn't required, but it is strongly encouraged to indicate their interest in the position.
I'm fine with that personally, but what other folks think? Okay, Mr. Cosgrove's good with that? Mr. Seep?
I concur with Melissa's remarks.
Okay, Mr. Severson?
Yeah, I'm fine with that too.
Okay, so let's go ahead and make a motion to adopt points 2, 5, and 7 with the language on number 2, strike the should and replace it with are strongly encouraged to. Is that how you said it?
Yes, that's what I said.
Okay, great. So motion by Cosgrove,
I'll second.
second by Luck. All those in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, that motion carries. So we're good on steps 2, 5, and 7. Now I've got several optional steps listed here, and I think we just need to take the temperature of the room, see what you all are comfortable with and what you don't want to do. Okay, Mr. Cosgrove said he's fine with all of them out the gate here.
I am too.
Okay. Mr. Seep or Mr. Severson, do you have any opinions on the optional ones, and do I need to read them?
I guess this is Carrie.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me? Yeah, so I was thinking maybe in the one where I think was option 6 down at the bottom where it says the county administrator, county clerk. I'm just wondering if maybe that the county administrator should be cut from running the actual county board meeting and a constitutional officer of some sort be there to do that, just because technically I think the county administrator is our employee. I don't think that should be required of running the board for us until we can get a chair voted on.
I'm glad you brought that up. So I really did mean in step number 6 that we choose one, that this committee chooses one.
Okay.
So perhaps would we be most comfortable with, I think I've seen some other counties do the clerk running the organizational meeting until the chair's elected.
Yeah, we've always did the clerk before in the past, but it could be anybody else who's going. I think it was in the picking. I just don't know if the county administrator would be the right person for that job to run the meeting in our absence or something. But
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Severson is correct. In the past, the clerk has always conducted the initial opening of the meeting and the conduct of the election.
Great. Well, so this would just formalize it in our county board rules. So we just be doing what we are already doing. We just formalize it.
So do we have a motion on the table? Or can I
No,
make a motion to accept?
Go ahead.
Can I make a motion to accept all of the optional changes with number 6, selecting the clerk?
Okay, the motion by Luck, second by Cosgrove. Any further discussion on that motion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Okay, that motion carries. All right, so we will work on getting this drafted into the county board rules and bring it back to the committee to finalize. All right, agenda item.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, thank you for all of your very hard and diligent work on this.
No problem. You all give me the good stuff to work with. Glad we record these meetings and I can get your thoughts written down. So you all are the good minds behind this. Agenda item number 8, committee restructuring. So with this one, I can't remember, there's been multiple things that have happened where I thought we had too many committees. I guess I've probably felt that way for more than 4 years now, but then I watched that Wisconsin Counties Association educational webinar. They called it committee structure and right sizing. Is how they phrased it. And this was one of those back in December. And I thought maybe the best thing to do this morning would just be to watch about, it's an hour-long video, but I picked out about 25 minutes of it that I thought might be the most valuable. Did anyone have a chance to watch this ahead of time, by the way? Mr. Langreich did. Okay, so if you all are okay with it, I thought we could just watch certain segments of it. I asked Ms. Scott if she could cue this up, and I gave the minute sections that we'll be watching are in the cover sheet. But of course, if you want to see the whole thing, that's great, and you should go watch it. But we were going to start at 5 minutes and 10 seconds. So it's just a little intro. It was La Crosse County and Ozaukee County. You'll hear the administrators from both those counties. And then they'll talk about the process they went through or the benefits of, or all the details of it, of how they have combined several of their committees. And then I think we'll be hearing probably Andy Phillips talking first. She's the counsel for the Counties Association that we go to with a lot of our questions. So we want to go ahead and start the video. I know I need to take a bathroom break, but you can go ahead and start the video. And I've watched it. Mr. Severson, if you can't hear it, let us know.
We're not gonna help.
But it hasn't started playing yet.
Dad, we didn't have audio.
I also watched that prior to our meeting here also, so I'm kind of familiar with what's going to be talking about.
That's great. I'm glad you, especially since you're on the phone, I'm glad you did that.
Mr. Severson is a great researcher.
Yes, he is. We're very fortunate.
Sorry.
We're still working on finding the volume here.
Great example of county work. So with that, let's take a look at the old county committee structure. We have these things called mandatory committees, and I've got a list here. And I hesitate to give you this list in the PowerPoint because I'm not sure that I can find every single instance within statute where a particular committee or commission or board is required at the county level. Understand that the statutes are cobbled together, meaning that they weren't all adopted at the same time. So I think oftentimes the legislature, when it created a new program, a new mandate for counties, they imposed a committee requirement without thinking about all of the other committees that are involved in the county process. And so when we look at this list of mandatory committees, it's a little bit overwhelming. There are a lot of committees that are required under Wisconsin law for counties to have. I don't want you to be overwhelmed as a result of this list. What I want you to understand is that, yes, we have this list of mandatory committee, but there are things that we can do to combine some of these committees, to provide a committee structure that subsumes many of the mandatory committees contained within Wisconsin law. That requires some thought. It requires a discerned effort to try to figure out how to put the committee structure together, but it's not impossible. And you're going to hear from Steve and Jason how it's not impossible. And then we have the Freedom Statute, 90371. I kind of teased this at the beginning of my comments here. Look at what that statute says. I put it in bold language. Every county may exercise any organizational or administrative power subject only to the Constitution and to any enactment of the legislature which is of statewide concern and uniformly affects every county. This is the statute that gives counties the ability to organize themselves from a government standpoint the way that they choose to be the most efficient way to organize themselves. And so again, there is no right or wrong answer. It's a question for your county as to how you're going to organize in the most efficient manner possible. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my friend Steve O'Malley to talk about the process that he went through across county. I'm controlling the slide deck, Steve, so let me know when I need to advance or retreat, okay?
Sounds good. Thanks, Andy. Good introduction. I've just got 3 short slides just to touch on, but as Andy referenced, our restructure happened about 18 years ago when I first started as county administrator here. The county board had a study committee trying to figure out how to combine the committees and try to be more succinct and streamlined than the previous process. We used to have 14 standing committees with county board members on all of them, and it was very difficult to hold any elected official or appointed official accountable for what was going on in any of the committees. What you see here are 5 standing committees plus executive governing the individual departments in a concise way that overall is wrapped up by the executive committee, which oversees finance, personnel, and really is kind of the cleanup committee for everything else within this. If you see the structure, and you'll see your own organizational structure mimicked here, but you see planning, resources, and development accomplishes many of the things that cover all of those departments. University extension does not have a separate committee. They report to planning, resources, and development, just as land conservation. Veterans aging and long-term care covers our nursing home operations and veteran services. Judiciary and law covers all of the related departments, courts and emergency services and law enforcement. Public works and infrastructure covers the departments that work quite closely together for facilities, parks, highways, solid waste. Health and Human Services combined board. It accomplishes both the Board of Public Health, Human Services, and all of the Chapter 51 requirements. And then finally, Executive Committee that covers all the insurance. Go to the next slide, please. So the county board and committees, the board chair is elected at our organizational meeting, and the board chair has complete authority under our ordinances to appoint the committee chairs and members to all committees. All of our board members that are elected fill out their preference for what committees they would like to be on. The board chair tries to keep their choice clear about that. Remember, all board members are elected to the board; they're not elected to committees. So by consolidating all of this, people have a better chance to get on the committees that they want to be on and can attend any and all meetings because there are only 5 standing committees plus credit. Standing committees have oversight of departments. We still have many special committees that some are made of citizens, some are made of supervisors, but those special committees do not oversee any departments. If you're interested in seeing more details, you can go to our website, Cross County, and look at Chapter 1 of our ordinances. You can see the breakdown of standing committees as well as the other special committees. At the time we did this consolidation, we had 14 plus standing committees. It was very hard for board members to keep up to date on what was going on in each committee. So as I said, we have 5 standing committees plus executive. Our executive committee is also our finance and personnel committee. It's made up of the committee chairs of the 5, plus the first and second vice chairs, plus 1 at large appointed by the board chair. Our board meetings are every 3rd Thursday, and committee week is the week prior to committee cycle or the board cycle. So that everything that goes through a standing committee, every resolution, every ordinance goes through a standing committee, often also goes through executive committee before reaching the full board. So our standard meetings handle all the resolutions, conditional use permits, everything that goes through the standing committees. And we also have added a full board policy planning meeting, which is where we give reports and updates where the board doesn't have to vote on anything. And so again, the full board is engaged in all of the agenda items in some way and can follow what's happening through the entire process, policy making for all committees. And then as the administrator, I am part of agenda preparation with all committee chairs and departments. So there will actually be, prior to holding a committee meeting, the week before that, I actually meet with department heads and the committee chairs to create the agenda each month so that we know what we're prepared for, what we're held accountable for, if we're ready for an item or not. And so I end up attending all of the meetings, and that way the board can hold me accountable for making sure we're following through on what they want to do. The other piece that I think is important to point out is that our supervisors are paid a monthly salary. They don't receive per diems. So the number of committee meetings isn't essential for their function. It's their ability to attend all meetings and receive a monthly salary. Next slide. Just gives you an idea of a sample calendar, so you end up seeing what I was talking about earlier. The full county board, regular county board, is the third Thursday of every month. This is just an example. Prior to that is committee week. So at 9 a.m. on Monday morning, Veterans Aging Long-Term Care Committee. At 4:30 is Public Works. And at 6 o'clock is our policy planning meeting, which is a full board meeting where we bring them up to date on items that are anticipated, comprehensive planning, building projects, what's going on with the homeless in the community, whatever are key issues that will be coming up that they don't need to vote on, but they need to be kept up to date. Then on Tuesday, it's at 4:30 is our Judiciary and Law Committee, and at 6:30 is our Health and Human Services meeting. All Wednesday early morning is the Executive Committee that kind of backs cleanup to all of the resolutions or issues that are coming through the other standing committees, particularly if they have a financial impact and need approval from Executive Committee before going to the full board the following Thursday. You'll notice that PRD, Planning Resources Development, is at 4 p.m. First of next month. That rotates depending upon the notice requirements that are happening, because as you should know, planning and zoning is always done in conjunction with our townships as far as what's happening, and they need to weigh in on conditional use permits, zoning changes, that type of thing. So that kind of bounces around a little bit and isn't always on a but again, as Andy mentioned, I'm available. WCA is available if you'd like to consult on the process that you would use to consolidate your committees. I'm just giving a very brief overview, but our county board was very involved in creating this new structure 18 years ago, and it's worked very well. Again, it also gives them a chance that county board members can engage at any point in the process, whether they're on any one of these committees or not. Quite often, we'll have board members attend more than one committee. They get to interact. They don't get to vote on that committee if they're not a member, but they certainly can interact and ask as many questions as they like of any of the presenters, any of the policy issues involved. And it allows all of our board members to be far more involved in the entire process making than just sitting on a particular committee. So that's what I have, Andy.
Let me ask you this, Steve, all right? So let's go back to this. Right now, you've got, here's your county board organization. Before you said you had 14 committees. That was 19 years ago. But was it 20 years ago when you took over as administrator? Is that what it was?
Yeah, 18 years ago, yeah.
And so you come in as administrator. You get a county board set up with 14 different committees. Who said, Steve, we need to change some of this? We need to change how we're going to do it.
Actually, it was the board. I was reluctant to, as a new administrator, to dabble too much in reorganizing their process. I was prepared to adapt to whatever they wanted, but they really wanted to streamline the process. I'm not going to say that's unanimous, but the key leaders of the board felt that, and they had heard of other counties that had consolidated committees. They were doing a study committee at the time and asked me to help them streamline the process. So it was driven by the board.
So how many board members?
Skipping ahead here, you asked him, I think, what's the biggest advantage or something like that, so we'll skip to that, and then we'll go to Ozaki County.
That you see on the 14th, now where you've got the 5 plus the super committee, for the benefits that you see.
I think the greatest benefit to the board is that they can hold the administrator accountable for what's going on over departments and within departments. Quite often, the first several months I was here, I'd be in a meeting somewhere and find out some committee had taken an action on X, Y, or Z, and I found out that later didn't know what I could do to affect the change or had to implement it. This structure allows me as the administrator to be held accountable for all policy actions or to make sure that all department heads are accountable and the board is being accountable for what we're actually finding as far as policy, practice, and of course budget.
When did they make the switch, Steve, from a per diem system to a salary?
I'll go to that Ozaki County section.
So, and Jason can talk about what happened. I can't believe it's been, did I get that right? It's 19 years in Ozaki County?
For me, yeah, and it's very glad. That's nobody gave them once.
When you're here for 5 years, you're here forever. Well, give that out, I guess.
We can put to the next slide if you want. So this is what we look like pre-organization, and I think I peeled out some of the special committees. These are really committees that were staffed by staff and company board members. And why did we reorganize? Similar to you, our board wanted to sort of introduce some private sector concepts and how we do things in Ozaki County, really make good use of our board of directors time, meet their expectations for that. So I think we had about 27 different committees, and pretty much every department had their own committee. And I think if you think about all the effort and work that goes into getting all the wheels turning when those committees meet, just the staff effort to churn out agenda is quite a bit. But I think the other thing is, in some of these areas, not all department heads, some of our department heads are great, some are amazing, and some maybe aren't. So I think what we saw in Ozaki County is we have a department head and a committee of board members, and it kind of becomes a little niche of power for people. So, it made some organizational changes difficult because of the committee structure. So, that kind of forced us to kind of look at things and what did we do with this whole Steve. Much like Sheboygan. But I would say that we utilize University Extension would sort of lead us, and we've reorganized twice in my time here. One time was really kind of a complete board reorganization, the other time committee to look at that. But the extension is great, and they're great facilitators, and they're really good. So I think when we think about things, our committee structure works. If it's not broken, can things be improved? I think we put that out here in Ozaki County. But we really try to do is maximize the policy focus for the board. So much like Sheboygan County, a lot of times our county board meetings are less than an hour. Because in Ozaki County, there was a sort of a cultural shift that took place with the reorganization where the board said, we're going to trust our staff and our committee members to do the work. We'll let them do all the heavy lifting, dating, and everything. And then let's bring fully baked out good policy concepts to the board. So our board meetings also moved very quickly, and probably why we don't see Andy there too often. Are there too many decision points? I think when we see the way the board structure, or obviously we have a human service committee and a community programs committee and a commission on aging. Obviously, there's a lot of overlap in policy areas there. And they have differing policy areas, and sometimes that happens, where there be two competing committees with two competing ideas. This allows the committees, once we reorganize, we'll see the slide coming up here, to really kind of talk about those things as a group. And really, do we look backwards or do we look forward? You know, I know when I started with Ozaukee County, we spent a lot of time looking at tolls that had already been paid or overtime that had already been paid out. And I think those reports have, I don't know that they necessarily have a purpose at a committee level, or it might be better about what's driving the overtime, what we can help sort of remedy some of these expenditure things rather than looking at things that are already happening. So, we always try to look forward at our committee level and look at the next slide. So I think, you know, what's the purpose? You know, per diem is a big thing, and we also eliminated per diem right about the same time that we and I think the board at that time kind of took an average. I think Andy touched on the self-organized county concept. I think, you know, we can say, well, we have board members that do more work, maybe they should be compensated more. I think you can accomplish some of those things in a reorganization, like, you know, the county and salary is about, about $5,500 coming up here annually. It's just a straight flat salary for every board member. The value there is, you know, I think everyone's on the same sort of playing field.
Jason, did you have, let me just interrupt real quick. When you went from per diem to salary, did you have a problem incentivizing people to show up at the committee meeting?
No. And I think one of the things, we do a report every year, and it shows where your attendance are. And so I think you can see very easily, you know, Jason's not showing up to meetings, it says.
So is it called the Ozaukee County Shame Report? Is that what it is, the Shame Report?
The Shame Report, yes, that's actually the official title of it. So in Ozaukee County, we let the staff committee do work. Let's say we do great linkages, like I said. If there's an aging issue and a community program issue and a human service issue, all of the people are sitting around the table. So we try to create linkages and not meeting. We like to think we maximize the expertise of our board members. So we have folks with a human service background or finance background, they find themselves on those committees. You know, we're organized led by function, much like across county. And again, I think it's really up to the board to determine that culture, you know, and talk about, you know, what do we do to maximize board members' time. So at the committee level, we think about money, budgets, expenditures, revenue, strategy, and the cost. So much like lacrosse county, we have a very, very similar model. You know, and I think part of this is, you know, we can take out many committees right now. And how are we going to get all this work? How can we do all these things? You know, how can a finance committee go to finance committee or IT? And I think low people, you know, what happens when you restructure things rather than saying, you know, we're going to take 5 1-hour meetings and make 5-hour meetings, we kind of focus on what's important and most importantly, get to the matters that should be a board. We had a board member, vice chair of the board for a long time, who I would say, you know, we pay these people a lot of money. We have a lot of department heads, and we put a lot of our expenditure and staff. I think, you know, back in town, about 55% of our, you know, annual expenditure. We should really move that money and get out of these people's way and let them do the work that we made them to do. So, you know, again, it's a cultural thing. It's a trust thing. You trust your staff to do the work. I'd say if you don't trust your staff to do the work, there's probably an issue there that you might want to dig into. You trust your committee members to do the work. You know, and there was some really cathartic moments as we reorganized and kind of moved in a new direction, and we kind of got everything on the table and talked about it. At least, you know, back out in the team in a better way. So we'll look for the next slide. So in Ozaukee County, we kind of consider our executive committee the hub of the people. Our executive committee is the board chair, the vice chair, the second vice chair, and when we structured thought process goes, the committee, the county board chair should be able to pick this together. So he appoints the 3 other committee chairs. So we have 5 standing committees and executive. The board, the vice chair and the second vice chair each chair standing committee, and then 3 members appointed from the body, elected by the board chair, also appointing the other committee. So our executive committee kind of links all those committees together, so they do the budget. Because we want to bring in all these different committee perspectives to your budget plan. They do all of our big capital planning. They do debt. Big debt offerings that goes to the executive committee. And union negotiating, although we do a lot more of that. No, they don't quite do as much. And then strategic planning. So they're the really sort of overarching strategic thinking committee, and they're the hub of the wheel in Ozaukee County. To the next one. So in our finance committee, just much like across county, Clerk Corporation Council, IT, HR, and finance, they're looking at our election, investments, child support, fiscal policy, personnel, and then our radio system and our IT. You can flip to the next slide. Human services, again, in Ozaukee County, this is one where we have a committee on board. The board has the public members representing the human service folks in our community. They have, in Ozaukee County, they actually have them meet simultaneously, so they meet with the committee, and then they're asked to vote on items pertaining to board actions. Much like lacrosse, they're dealing with our AODA now. Senior services, the pandemic's been a big topic of discussion as they start meeting together. Now, in Ozaukee County, we also tell our department and looking at their sometimes our veteran services department is a two-person shop. They might not have a big policy issue, or they just have a financial report to submit to the committee. We'll tell our veteran service officer, don't come if you have anything to present to the committee that day. If you have an item you want to discuss, you're always welcome to join us and submit those items. But if you're just submitting your financial or your committee report, don't attend that day. So that's one way I was kind of keep things moving.
But before we move to the next slide, real quick, Jason, I just want to note for the audience that Ozaukee County has a combined health department with Washington County. And yet public health still appears under the Human Services Committee banner. I would assume that this committee then is responsible for providing some level of policy oversight in the combined health department. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. So with Washington County, we have a joint board of health that has representatives of both counties. And they meet on a quarterly basis, kind of discuss some of those policy issues. But items of personnel and financial items and things like that, in our structure, Ozaukee County, the fiscal officer for the department, they still bring those items to our human services committee, and then they work their way up. That's our resources, very similar to the cross. Our extension department does a report there. I think we're seeing more and more overlap in what they're doing for our landing water. Some of the farming, clean farming issues out there, soil health and the like, registered deeds, land information. Again, it's all our registered deeds. Make your financial report. If you don't have a big policy item come for the committee, be available. We can have you jump on Zoom if we have a question, but a lot of times some of the department heads won't attend committees unless they have work to do with the committee. I need your book for the next slide. Public safety, clerk of courts, county sheriff, DA, EM, and coroner. Obviously, committee made up primarily of our constitutional officers, but they're overseeing things in the jail and some of the other policy matters that.
I believe, Jason, isn't this committee, your grievance committee, 5926 as well for issues, personnel issues out of the sheriff's office?
They are, and then they also do the hiring, and things that are required by statute and also by the collective bargaining agreement.
Well, and I mean, that's a good example of how you're taking various roles that are required by statute and combining them into one committee in a way that makes sense, in a way that works.
Yeah, and I think if we go back, I don't want to go all the way back, but then the first slide you showed with all the statutory requirements, the Commission on Aging, the Board of Health, the Community Programs Committee, and Human Services Committee. I think when we looked at that and said, yes, these are all statutory functions, but they can be accomplished by a single committee. And then public works, highway, transit, facilities for us. We run a bus here. We have a shared ride taxi, also a service that we share with Washington County, and the open routes. Those issues. I think our Average committee meetings are probably about an hour to 90 minutes. Our board meetings are generally about an hour, depending on the items that are up. We do have, I would add the other thing we do, much like LaCrosse County, we have a mid-month meeting. We do it on the first Wednesday of the month for business. Then we have a mid-month policy meeting in April. So big items, a lot of times we'll have one dedicated to budget. We're looking at a pretty significant park purchase here in Ozaukee County along Lake Michigan. So that's something that we would bring to our mid-month meeting. The value of that, I think, is we're in sort of almost a committee of the whole. So we're sort of not fettered by our county board rules. It's an open discussion. I'm not saying two presidents know very spoke place in the issue. This allows staff and allows county board members to ask all the questions they want. And then I think the value of that is that probably not has to make a decision for at least 2 weeks, maybe sometime longer, and give them time to sort of process things, talk to their colleagues, and then feel confident with folks that they're going to cast on big policy that for.
Okay, so that's the end of what I kind of highlighted out of the video to watch. I think we did lose Mr. Severson, but he might be jumping back on. But let's just go around to different committee members and let's just, oh no, looks like he's back. I see his phone number's back. So let's just go around and get thoughts from people. So who wants to start us out? Mr. Cosgrove?
Sure. I like the concept of both. And this is obviously something you and I have discussed for several years, and how to make it a reality and efficient and done well is the real question.
Okay, thank you. Others?
I agree. It makes sense to try to do this. And obviously there's a lot of counties that have this system, so it doesn't seem like we need to completely reinvent the wheel. I mean, I don't see any reason not to do it, honestly. Does anyone see any downsides to doing it?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
I think it's a very good concept. It deals with the problem of, among other things, of silos. It takes down silos and it allows people to collaborate in a much more effective way, rather than so many departments being an island unto themselves. Those departments often can be a resource to one another in sort of a consortium approach. I think it's a very good concept.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Severson?
I agree with the concept of doing this, and I think it has many advantages to that. I don't know. My one concern would be if we start grouping everything together in the one, like how long will these meetings last? And like, are we going to be able to sit in all day meetings? And I do like the concept of an executive committee, but looking at all those other committees that go under the executive committee, I mean, if we have a meeting on that, is that going to be an all day meeting? But that's tough to work out, and I'm open to discussing how we can be more efficient regarding our committee structure anyway. So.
And your question, that is something we could definitely look into with these two counties. We could find out how long their standing committee meetings are, over the course of a year, get several samples to see. One thing I wanted a couple of thoughts I was jotting down here that I wanted to highlight. So we essentially, looking at those charts that both administrators showed from those other two counties, we've essentially already combined our HHS board. We have several things reporting to that, and especially probably our LEJC committee. It basically already mimics what those other counties do. It's just these other departments we don't. And I think the way finance and personnel is set up right now is kind of like our executive, but it's, I often don't think of it as the executive committee, but then Mr. Langrek reminds me that it is in the committee structure document. So it's interesting to see how they think of it a little bit differently, I thought. And then I wanted to highlight too the attachments that I included. So the administrator from La Crosse County said, you know, if you want to see more detail, you can go to our code of ordinances. So I did, I dug that up, and that's attachment 8A. And I found it helpful to see the headings on the table of contents. They say standing committees is the first heading, and then the second one is special committees. And you see different things listed under there that we're pretty used to seeing, but I think in another county I saw they separate them out even further. Sometimes they'll call some of them ad hoc committees, which we've called some of our committees before. So they'll have temporary committees. And then I've seen advisory committees, and those tend to be mostly made up of citizens. And I think if you go to La Crosse's and start scrolling down, you'll see some of these special committees. What one of these? One of them might be like, not quite for sure, but like the Historic Sites Preservation Committee. I think that's mostly citizens, but then it says this committee reports to the, and then they'll say something like the Planning Resources Standing Committee. So they'll have kind of this hierarchy so that it's understood which committees relate to which. And then also there, I've seen elsewhere, I don't know where I saw this, they'll say something like Special Appointments Committee. And that will be like where one county board member gets appointed to a library board or a Southwest Regional Planning Commission. So they kind of group all these things into, for me, easier to understand categories than our current system of putting everything in one document. And then I wanted to mention too, Mr. Seep, I know you've been talking for quite a while about the difference between the Veterans Service Committee and the Veterans Service Commission. And you've talked about it with me several times, and I've not quite understood it until I watched this video and then started looking into what the state law said and how these counties handle it. And indeed, what you've been kind of harping on for a while here is how they do it in these counties. They'll have 3 citizens appointed to the Veterans Service Commission. And that's a special committee in a way that reports to then the, whatever they call it in these different counties, their standing committee that handles veterans issues. So I just wanted to highlight that is addressed by these other 2 counties.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I feel somewhat vindicated, though I think Mr. Langrek is in agreement with that viewpoint. The other issue that has been long-standing is that the view that Veterans Service Department is basically a human services position, and it has in Richland County been somewhat isolated from all of the other resources of health and human services, and has been, looked upon somewhat as an island unto itself. I think that is a disadvantage in terms of servicing our veterans. And I think that I noticed here that the veteran services in these 2 models were under human services. I think that is something that we need to think about down the line. I know that there are some folks who object to that integration with human services on the grounds that some of them feel that human services is a welfare office, and that's of course a mistaken view. But that is something that I think can be much more efficient for the county, because there are so many resources that are available to one another by integrating those services, and it is a human service position. I leave it at that.
Mr. Chair, that's Kerry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm kind of in agreement with Don on this one with the Veteran Service Committee. At one point in time, I do think that the Veteran Service Committee or the commission, whatever we had, fell under Health and Human Services Board as kind of like a restructuring. And somehow, within the years, I don't know if it was with the previous Veteran Service Officer or the current VSO, that it got changed over to where they're their own independent committee. But I believe at one point they did fall under Health and Human Services Board.
And
That's correct.
I do want to.
That is correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted there. I did just want to add one clarification, and I'm not disagreeing with either one of you, but I just want to clarify that in both of these counties, the veteran service function or department reports to a policy oversight committee that's not Health and Human Services. So in across county, the veterans department reports to the Veterans Aging and Long-Term Care Committee, which
That's the same as ADRC.
Well, in this case, I think it's, I'm just reading here and there, their committee structure document. County institutions, Hillview Healthcare Center, Hillview Terrace, Carroll Heights Apartments, and Lakeview Health Center, and then the Veteran Service Department. They report to that particular committee. They have a separate Health and Human Services Committee. So I'm sure you're correct that, I'm sure you're both, or you're not saying this, but I'm sure there are other counties where Veterans Department reports to a committee that handles HHS functions. I just want to clarify that in these particular examples, they don't. They put them under more of the long-term care or the aging or with the like the Pine Valley Community Village. So I think we have options. And one of the most helpful things for me to hear in this video was state law doesn't preclude us from setting it up as far as what works best for us. You know, we have the freedom to set the committees up how the county board wants them to be set up within some parameters, but for the most part, we have a lot of freedom.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, may I add?
Go ahead.
That I think Mr. Langrick has a lot of experience with veteran services, given his background, and I think his experience and perspective on this will be very helpful to the county.
Okay, thank you. Any other committee members with comments on this? So how I wrote out a motion today for us, if you all are interested in it being put this way, a motion to recommend drafting options for restructuring committees to improve efficiency and accountability to be considered at a future Rules and Resolutions Committee meeting.
I so move.
Motion by Seep, second by Cosgrove. Any further discussion?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Who would be writing this? Would this all be falling on you, or who? What would be the expectation of how this gets written, Mr. Langrick?
I was going to beg Mr. Langrick, but I
think it should go to the Strategic Planning Committee. I'm just kidding on that one.
Oh, good, because I was going to punt that one to his luck. Yes, it usually gets passed around. You know, I think this is going to take, honestly, I think it's going to take some collaboration. I don't see one person being able to do this.
Agreed.
And I think the point of drafting options is so that this committee can relook at it, the group of 5, and make changes to whatever drafts there are. So I would like to take some of the focus off of maybe who drafts it and more making sure that we have enough options to consider and that everyone feels like they can vote with their conscience and speak all their thoughts when they look at the options. Don't want anyone to feel rushed or like they haven't been able to give their opinions. Mr.
Chair, if I can comment, yeah, I would agree that probably a rollout or project like this would take multiple decision points through a committee here, starting with how many standing committees do you want? What types of existing committees do you see falling underneath then those 5? Next phases then would be discussing on, and now what authorities and responsibility languages and statutory assignments then kind of fall then with underneath once you kind of have your framework set up. So I would see it as multiple steps on, can we cross this hurdle and agree how many we have and what we want to call them, what we want to try to put under them.
So follow-up question.
Yep, go ahead.
So Mr. Langry, given the discussion we just had on Tuesday about your strategic planning and how much time you have and capacity you have, is this something you have capacity for, or is this something that we as committee members should take on instead?
It's like we talked about in finance and personnel, as things come up and they become priorities, we try to address them. The good news of having a finance and personnel meeting every 2 weeks is can certainly give guidance from a member like yourself to take action to say this is now your number 1 priority or number 2 or 3 thereon. But I mean, obviously, with yourself being on that committee meeting, you understand kind of what's on our plate right now. So it just comes down to affirming that if this is a priority to get done, then understanding other things might have to get slid back a little bit.
Right. So if I'm hearing you right, what you're saying is that you don't really have time to add this to your plate necessarily. You will, but something will have to slide off. So, I mean, I guess I'm suggesting that we don't put this on administration and that we as a committee at least attempt to try to get some kind of draft language together for us to start making decisions. I mean, I now it's January now, so I do have more time available. So I would volunteer. I would hope someone else might volunteer to help me too, but I'm just not sure that putting it on Mr. Langrick is a good idea.
One thought I have is that back in October, it's been a few months now, obviously, but Mr. Langrick did come to us with a list of all of our committees, commissions, and boards, and he had done quite a bit of work.
I visualize it, I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Chair, but between the documents that you had produced today, kind of showing the layout of departments that are responding to existing committees, the spreadsheet that we did talk about in October with this group that kind of has a idea of restructuring those in a spreadsheet type of format. I think there are materials there that we can copy, cut, paste, or that you folks can use to copy, cut, paste to help draft it so you're not starting over with understanding how everything is currently laid out.
So Supervisor Luck, if you'd like to volunteer to take his materials and that other department spreadsheet that I prepared for agenda item number 5 and take an initial shot at it and bring those options to us, I would love that.
Okay, sounds good.
Anyone opposed to her taking that on?
Please, somebody be opposed.
I hear no opposition.
That's
Okay,
fine.
so any further discussion on the motion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Okay, that carries. We'll look forward to talking about that further. That takes us to agenda item number 9, future agenda items. Mr. Cosgrove, do you have any? Okay. Is this topic, Ms. Luck?
I just have a question. What kind of timeline are we? Is this something we're looking to accomplish before the next board is seated, or I'm just wondering how much time I have to work on this? Or are we looking to have at least a preliminary discussion at our next meeting?
I think typically lately, if we give direction that something should be further developed, in this committee at least, we've been handling it the next month. Now,
Okay.
this one I can see you taking several months. We only have 3 more scheduled meetings before the next organizational meeting. But we have 3. We have 3 meetings, and if this group decides it's not ready to take to the county board, by then I'm sure we'll know more after February. I'm sure we'll get a good feeling for where we're at after that meeting.
From an
I don't
administrative
have any
point
other
on
future agenda items.
You don't have anything else
Nope.
under future agenda items? Okay.
I was just gonna say from administrative point for a deadline, I know part of this would trickle into putting out an orientation packet of which we're asking folks interest in what they would like to be a part of, so we would ideally have it sorted out and already through resolution to the county board before we were to solicit that so that folks understood what they wanted to sign up for. Now, that doesn't necessarily have to happen because there's other elements of it too then of if we're going to, depending on how we want to seat committees, that timeline could be shifted to the right if we're just going to do seat a chair and seat a vice at an organizational meeting. We wouldn't be doing a committee assignment then until May. So they're, depending on how some of those elements go, slides your timeline to the right or left.
Okay, so it sounds like getting to the county board meeting in March or April, those are both options. Based on what you said, if we want to push off committee assignments. So,
I have one more thing to,
yeah, Mr. Cosgrove.
so in the spirit of what we're talking about doing here, do we need to review our committee setup in terms of how many people are on each committee? Because now if we're talking about dividing 21 supervisors between 5 overall supervising committees, we may need to look at that in conjunction with what we're talking about.
And that kind of gets back to what Mr. Langrick said about the framework. You know, what sort of, how many committees, and I think along with how many committees, it's going to be how many people on each committee. So Supervisor Luck, as you kind of put together different options, there might be like a bit of a framework. Plus there might be some more of the details. You know, you could put veterans here or there, you could put land conservation here or there, you know, kind of thinking through those different things. So you might think of this in 2 different buckets. Okay, Mr. Severson, do you have any future agenda items?
Nothing.
Okay, Mr. Seep, do you have any?
Yeah, I have one thing that I would like to inform the committee of. Some time ago, I announced that I was going to be going to Chicago on January 2nd. However, about a week before January 2nd, I got a call from the hospital in Chicago telling me that they had a severe COVID outbreak and they have postponed my entrance into the blind to a date unknown. So I will be around to bother you for a while, and presumption being a greater sin than despair, I'll commit that sin and hope that I'll be with you in the next term, depending upon the outcome of the election.
Okay, thanks for keeping us updated, and we'll look forward to hopefully seeing you in person one of these days.
Thank you very kindly. It's nice of you to say that.
Okay, so that takes us to agenda item number 10, adjournment. So I'm looking for a motion to adjourn to Thursday, February 3rd at 10 a.m. Motion by
A
Luck,
second.
second by Severson. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 You're adjourned. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate your time today.
If Mr. Langrick is still there, if I could ask if he could give me a call.
Yes, he heard you.
Thank you.